This is the blank page that all stories begin on. This one has the title, I Don't Think That's an Angel, and by J. Wilburn. So let's see what we can do with this. Bo Rockborough. Let's say, entered the funeral home thinking New Year's Day was the worst day for a funeral. Maybe Christmas or Thanksgiving would be worse, but no one would schedule funerals on those days. Here he was, hung over, as he imagined everyone else would be too, even if they hadn't laid it on quite as thick as he had the night and year before. Alright, do you usually start a story with the character's name? I try not to, but it is hard to get that opening sentence without it. It kind of depends. I think if the story is character driven, then it doesn't hurt to let readers know right away who they're connecting to. There's an aspect of short stories or any kind of story that's called the floating head, where you kind of give people no context. So you say he stood and began to walk. If you begin that with the first thing, then you have this like floating character with nothing around them and all that sort of thing. Now, of course, you and I would recognize that that's probably a bad opening sentence. But there's that idea of giving the reader some kind of grounding. Now, you can do that with setting. You can do that with other things. A great opening line that's sort of just this idea that kind of hooks you in and makes you think is always good. But it's almost that second or third or even fourth sentence that matter a great deal with that great opening line. You have a great opening line and then three nothing sentences that follow it, then you undermine what you have going on, and everybody's like, let's get to it. What's the story here? So because this story is so character driven, I decided to start with the name on purpose. Originally I was thinking as Bo Rockborough entered the funeral home, that kind of thing, but I took out the as because I actually think that starting with the name was stronger in that case. I really don't overthink it too much, though, so it's not a situation where I would sit and ponder over whether I should start with the name or not. Typically, I'll just blow into the story. Usually, the faster I get into the story, the better. But a lot of that, sometimes I'll adjust in the edits and stuff. So I've gotten less and less particular about what I do with the first draft other than getting the story down, and I kind of count on that first and second edit to push through. I know that those of you listening, Armand tends to write a pretty clean first draft, so he kind of plows through that first draft, but then doesn't make a lot of changes in the edits when he goes forward. I'm a little different in the sense that like a lot of what I think makes my stories good actually comes out of those first and second edits. So all that to say that a lot of times I will start with the character's name simply because if it's a character-driven story, I want the readers to connect pretty quickly to who their viewpoint character is, so that they have a viewpoint as they're going through here. Very good question, man. Even if they laid it on quite as thick as he had the night before. All right. Where did I want to go next with this? I got some notes down and some characters I want to introduce, but there's a few things, a little bit of business that I want to get through. Also, there's some subtleties to this story where I'm going to have the background of these characters talked about, but not really, in the sense that like we're not going to be explicit with who they are and just force the audience to kind of draw their own conclusions here. So in that sense, I'm choosing my words a little more carefully in this first draft than I normally would. All right. It was easier when he was younger. Much younger than 60. Much younger than 60 years old. But he still required recovery time at any age. He squinted against the soft light inside as he mounted the short run of carpeted stairs. These places had a smell. Not really the smell of death. No comment there. But a flowery odor. That he couldn't help but to associate with death and funerals. He hadn't worn his sunglasses. Because he was always self-conscious about being a cliche. He wished he had them now as he tried to read the letters on the board. Oh, I got two of these. Hold on. On the board, identifying which bodies occupied which rooms. Looked like a few people had decided to let's say to mourn passings on the first day of the year. Okay. Both thought he was having a reading issue as he failed to find John Grief's name on the first two passes. Maybe it was the wrong place. He had checked multiple times before coming, but he could still be wrong. Then it clicked into place. They had used John's real name. Alright, let's do... What is John's real name? Alright, Walter A. Herbert. That did not sound like the moniker. I'm not going to spell that right. No, not manicure. That did not sound like... I'm going to find that word later. You could tell you're a bad writer when you have to go to a dumber word because you can't spell the word you're looking for. That did not sound like the name of a powerful actor turned director. Of course, on the other hand, maybe it did. Bo tried to remember what the A stood for, but came up blank. He memorized the suite number and started walking through the flowery stink of the place. Alright, I don't need a comma after that. And moving right along. Reaching the open doors, he saw it was a fine turnout. Most of them wore their sunglasses, though. Okay, let's say Bo scanned the faces, looking for the familiar friends he had worked with in decades past. As he looked upon stranger after stranger, he started to realize that he wasn't positive the faces he sought were still alive. He was in a funeral home looking for ghosts. Most of the people, I guess this is the same paragraph, hold on. Most of the people he worked with in the 80s and 90s had not made it to 60 years old. He'd consider them lucky, except that a few of them had died hard and ugly. Some of it was, let's see, I'm going to make this a new paragraph after all. Some of it was disease, but drugs and alcohol, usually together, along with self-destructive destructive lives counted for most. He knew a few others had survived, but none of them appeared to be here. Maybe it was the date. Probably it was not wanting to face their own mortality. Say, I'll do a new paragraph. John Grief had died on on December 30th. One day before his 61st birthday. Some clogged heart thing, from what Bo had heard, but he was afraid to ask. He probably needed to get his cholesterol. Alright, he probably needed to get his cholesterol checked before he checked out too. Alright. He did recognize some of these folks. Most of them were new to the industry. Even though Bo still did some work with the help of little blue pills. He hadn't worked with most of these actors. Both the men and women were easily a third his age. Instead of blue pills, he took out a Goodies powder and chewed it up to help him through this performance. Oh, but there she was. He had kind of feared she might be here, but in the end, Bo had decided she didn't like John that much, and she had better New Year's plans. Let's say Kelly. Kelly, his latest ex-wife, latest ex-wife was here with her fiance, Carl Lessing. He was closer to her age. Bo couldn't remember exactly, but guessed she had, let's say estimated instead of guessed, but estimated she had turned 42 this year. She was a spiritual cleanser now, with her own Patreon page, and Carl did something with cars, but didn't work at a dealership. Bo turned away and strolled back up the hall. He swallowed on a bitter taste down in his throat that was only partially due to the headache powders. Alright, let's add a Y on partially just because we can. Alright. He wasn't leaving. He didn't hate her and him quite that much. He just needed a little more time before he could take this all in. Alright, I want to add something here. Alright, he squinted. He thought he was reading. Say that was when the first flash of light hit him. So I'm adding this in back when he was walking up the hallway. The pastel colors suddenly turned brilliant bright. He didn't swoon, and it didn't really hurt, but he reached out. No, I don't want him reaching out because I have him reaching the open doors. He held the wall and his head anyway. It was gone as quickly as it came. He chalked it up right away to heavy drinking and dehydration. Okay, apparently I decided to hit the caps lock, so let's fix that. Heavy drinking and dehydration. He also considered that it would be quite a point of gossip around the sets in coming days if he were to drop dead of an aneurysm. Alright, let me see if the computer can help me spell that. Drop dead of an aneurysm in the middle of John Grief's viewing. Alright, so we added that in. Now we'll do another one here. The second flash of light hit him there, hit him then, almost in the same spot as the first. Bo found a high-backed chair and sat down heavy. It creaked with his sudden weight, but held. He imagined... I need to take out that comma. He imagined bigger bodies than his had collapsed here in their sorrow in the past. As he opened his eyes, the overbright colors finished bleeding out of the world, and he got a few milliseconds view of a figure before it flashed, let's say winked, before it winked out of existence too. Hallucinations could be part of drinking and dehydration too. He was sober at the moment though, even if hungover. It was fast enough that he could dismiss the afterimage of a person as merely his stressed imagination. Any other explanation came with too many downsides, so he chose not to explore them. Bo, he looked over, expecting to have to be nice to Kelly, but it wasn't her voice, and it wasn't her. Say Brandy Pound half Kelly's age. Brandy Pound was half Kelly's age. Bo stood to hug and greet her. No, you don't have to get up for me. She accepted his hug. Let's say before he let go, he realized she was treating him like an old man for whom standing, say merely standing, for whom merely standing might be a real struggle. Of course, he was the same age as her boss, who had just died. She probably saw him as ancient, even though they had talked about doing scenes together in the future. He was feeling ancient. How are you holding up? He asked. He was about to add her name, but didn't know whether to go with Brandy or Dawn. She had still been John's assistant, but had started performing over the last year. It's been tough. Do you know what you plan to do yet? Well, I'm going to still perform. And John's partners still want me to run things for them. Your own studio. That's great. I mean, not great, he's gone, but you know what I mean. So yeah, that's fine. I wouldn't own anything except my paycheck, which is enough for me for now. Well, there you go. My own site is doing well, and I can still do my live streams until we sort out all the mess. Let's say Bo had never done live work. He always needed the option for cuts and edits. The industry was passing him by if it hadn't already. He hadn't been completely stupid with his money over the years, but he hadn't been smart enough to be able to stop working some, at least. All right. What sort of mess? She rolled her eyes. That made her seem even younger to him, and made him feel like maybe he did need to sit down, like the old man he was. He had started to feel old in the 90s. But had kept going as best he could. Scenes had started to get more extreme, but nothing. Hey, Tempest, thank you for being here. All right. Okay, but he kept going as best he could. Scenes had started to get more extreme, but nothing compared to what was out there today. He had never adjusted well to changes over the decades. Everyone shaving clean, including the men, was one he still wasn't completely comfortable with. Brandy said, no, let's just get, I gave her two names, so let's just say she said, John wasn't great with the books. We're having trouble lining everything up. If we can't figure it out. She said John wasn't great with the books. We're having trouble lining everything up. If we can't figure it out, we'll have to close the studio just to avoid going to jail. Bo's eyes went wide. Oh shit. Was he skimming? wasn't sure, let's say he wasn't sure why that would matter if John owned the place, unless he had cheated the partners or dodged the IRS. It looks more like negligence than anything like that, she said. But we've got to figure it out if we're going forward. Let me know anything I can do. He said, after it came out of his mouth, he realized he probably had nothing to offer with those types of problems. It was just a thing people said at times like these. She hugged him again and said, "I'll let you know. Thank you. Thank you for coming." As she walked away, he thought her response was just a thing people said too. The third flash of light was more intense than the previous two. Now there was no denying something was wrong. I think I'm going to spell something with an H instead of a J. I hope nobody minds. We'll go ahead and fix that real quick, just to keep it standard English here. Now, there was no denying something was wrong. The light was so bright that it killed all other colors. The hall, the building, the world vanished in the shadows created by that brilliant glow. Say, Bo didn't want to look into that light, so it took him a few seconds to identify a figure in the middle of it. It was female, but her features were obscured to darkness by the same bright glow around her. She wore white jeans. And a form-fitting tee that showed midriff. It was the sort of outfit actresses wore at the beginning of scenes. Back when he and John were both still actors, they joked about how pointless wardrobe. Okay, I don't know why I'm putting extra letters in here. How pointless wardrobe was when viewers now had the power to fast forward past all the setup. Alright. She had wings too. They were made of light and seemed to be the source of the brilliance that threatened. Seemed to be the source of the brilliance that threatened to burn his eyes and split his skull. Bo sat down hard, and the chair happened to be behind where he fell by pure chance. The images flashed out of existence, but left a spread of colors in his vision that floated to and fro in the shape of his strange little angel. You okay, Bo? It wasn't his ex. It wasn't his ex this time either. It took him a couple seconds to collect himself and identify her. Alright, what's this person's name? Carmen. It was Carmen Stern. She was much older than Brandy, but still quite a bit younger than Bo himself. say Carmen had gone by a few different names. But mostly Duchess von Hesse say when he worked with her. He decided it was safest to go with her real name since she was long retired. Carmen. Let's say Beau. Beau tried to stand. But his legs didn't seem ready for that. Okay, we'll do a new paragraph. She knelt beside his chair, like her knees still worked as well as the old days. Don't get up. We can talk right here. He was ancient. He decided. I didn't see you when I first got here. Well, it is a big crowd. That's nice to see. I was worried no one would show up with it being this day. Yeah, hell of a way to start the year. You guys were super close. Came up together. I imagine this hit you pretty hard. Beau nodded and looked away. She placed a hand on his arm and squeezed. He felt a stirring that wasn't appropriate for this setting. You two dated at one point, right? She chuckled and said, who didn't date John? Right? We were friendly still, but I hadn't talked with him in years. Right. I still did work with him from time to time. Behind the camera. Let's say he didn't like that she assumed enough to ask that question. No, on-screen talent still. Not all the time. But I filled in when he needed me. She made a humming noise and then said, "Look at you, Tiger. I'm impressed." He laughed and shrugged. She had been good with her money and was doing some sort of media thing on the internet that had nothing to do with the industry. All right. She said something, but he didn't hear a word of it as he watched a thing made out of shadow walk along the wall from the entrance toward John Grief's suite. It appeared to wear robes. It had wings made out of feathers, but they hung limp and dark behind the figure's back. The light came from a halo this time. It was bright. I'm going to make this a new paragraph here. All right, the light came from a halo this time. It was bright, but nothing like the flashes that had previously changed the nature of other colors or darkened the world entirely. No, this thing stalked through this world without looking like it really belonged. The halo was yellow, but tinged with a border of bloody red. Bo started to entertain the idea that these things were more than hallucinations, but something other than the angels his mother used to pray to come protect him. To come protect him and deliver him from a life of sin. The thing continued up the hall. The thing continued up the hall and entered the suite. Entered the viewing room, I guess. Entered the viewing, where Bo lost track of it. Bo? Sorry. I saw a ghost. He choked before he could come up with a response. She patted his back lightly. Sorry, that was in poor taste. No, it's fine. What were you saying? Alright. Doesn't matter. She stood up and he caught her by the wrist. Let me put a comma there. Being careful not to squeeze too hard. Too hard or too desperate. Okay. No, stay here. She patted his hand with her. She patted his hand over her wrist with her free hand. I need to finish making the rounds. If you want, I can come get you before a few of us go out for drinks. I need some hair of the dog myself. He smiled and let go of her. That sounds good. Terrible day for a funeral. Are there many folks from our day around? I didn't see any. She frowned. My day is still going, old man. He cringed and said, ouch. I mean, it's true, but ouch. She laughed. Just giving you a hard time. No, not many from back in the day. A couple you might have known from the early 2000s. All of them are behind the camera now. He rolled his eye. He rolled his eyes. Yeah, come get me. Come get me when you go. I'll have my walker. I'll have my walker and nurse standing by. She swatted his shoulder as a joke, but it really did hurt. Stop it. He let her go and then saw more dark figures approaching. Bo's breath caught in his throat. These didn't even have halos. That yellow bordered by red light outlined their dark shapes. Feathers actually fell white from their ragged wings. All the ones he could make out were female. A few appeared to be unclothed, but shadow hid most all the detail. Bo pressed himself into the upholstery of his chair, hoping to go unnoticed by these passing creatures. Something grabbed his arm as they as they drew even with him, and he cried out, "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you." Kelly, his ex, had finally arrived. He started... I'm going to make this the same paragraph here because I'm going to have her speak again. He started to rise. He started to rise, but she held him down. "No, you can stay seated. That's fine." How old did he really look? One of the figures turned its featureless shadow of a head in his direction. The rumbling noise that came from her could have been a growl or a purr. A feather floated free of her right wing as the group of specters continued on to John's body. Let's say continued on to where John's body lay. Everything in him told him he shouldn't. But he held out his palm as the frayed white feather floated back and forth on its way down. His muscles tightened as the feather approached landing. He thought he might have felt something, but he couldn't be sure before it broke into scattered light and disappeared entirely. Bo lowered his hand and saw Kelly kneeling beside him and staring. This wasn't good. He needed to say something. So, what did you see? Nothing. I'm just tired. Not nothing. I can feel it too. Tell me what you saw. He hesitated, wondering what she had noticed. Then he remembered she was into all that spiritualist mumbo jumbo. He wasn't about to give her ammunition to talk about him in her next video. No way. It was nothing. How's Carl? Carl is fine. I know there are spirits here. I'm only catching glimpses from the corners of my eyes. I feel something. I think it is dark, but they're not revealing themselves to me, and I can't really identify the energy one way or the other. Just tell me. I don't want to be in your video. I don't want to be in your videos. She frowned at him. I never use names. You'd know that if you watched any of them. Do you watch any of my videos? That's not even the same thing. And you know it. But I take your point. Tell me what you saw. Bo sighed as he watched the last group of spirits enter the room at the end of the hall. Okay. Angels, I think, sort of. What do you mean, sort of? bow side again. They're dark. Almost like they're hidden in shadows. Made of shadows? Maybe. They have wings, either made of light or feathers. It's almost like the light around them makes them darker. Kelly's eyes stared into his with a level of concentration and sincerity that made him wildly uncomfortable. They're using the light to conceal themselves. I don't know. Maybe. I don't think those are angels. Bo rolled his eyes. I don't think they're real, Kelly. You're lying. But I understand why you are afraid. He couldn't meet her eyes. I don't believe in any of this stuff. What you believe doesn't change what is real, she said as she stood up. Where did they go? Do you see them now? He turned his attention toward the viewing. She pointed. In there? I guess maybe. Now she took his hands and pulled him to his feet. He felt too weak to stand, but it turned out he was too weak to resist. Kelly pulled him along the hall toward the room. The figures emerged in a wash of light before Bo and his ex could arrive. He pulled her sideways into the wall against the flowery paper that matched the perfume stink of the place. She held his shoulder and chest. Are they here? Just be quiet, he whispered. I don't want them to see me. Kelly ran her hands through the air around him and acted like she was plucking something away from him. It probably had to do with auras and energy. It made him want to shove her. He didn't, though, because deep down he didn't want to face this alone. Hold on just a second, I'm going to turn off a heater behind me. Alright. In the midst of all those dark female forms with various styles of wings was a man in a suit. The light caught the curves and lines of his face at various angles. He was waxy, swollen, and misshapen. It was definitely John Grief, though. John. Bo whispered the name despite his fear. The entourage of winged women. No, I don't need a dash there. The entourage of winged women paid him no mind. John, however, lifted one thick hand, bubbled with fluid, and waved as he passed. They approached the double doors of the funeral home, and light replaced shadow. All the figures, including John, vanished, and the world slowly returned to normal in Bo's vision. The energy, Kelly said, whatever it was, it's gone. He moved on. He crossed over. Right? Did you see it? Bo pulled away from her. I didn't see anything. Dump all your crazy on your fiance, on your new fiance, and leave me out of it. Don't act like that. He stalked through the hall and out the doors as if he were chasing John's ghost and his gang of dark angels. Let's say Bo sat. No, we need to make a new paragraph. Bo sat down hard on the concrete steps outside. They had far less give than the chair, and his tailbone smarted. He drew in the cool, fresh air. It took 3 breaths for him to feel like his lungs had caught up on their oxygen. The sunlight drilled pain into his skull, but he took it. Bo bowed his head and decided he was going to wait on Carmen and her friends for that drink. Maybe he needed to go back inside to say goodbye to John's body, which he assumed was still there, even if the ghost had found better places to spend his new year.